So playing that probably was more for me than for you, because where I really wanted to be the day we did that was here. This is where the party was. I had to appear to be modest in that room with the other 9 losers. So it's really, really good to be in the house with you today. So this convocation is dedicated to 2 things. First of all, it's dedicated to what does number 1 look like? And we'll have a discerning process to go through. Hopefully by the time we end today, everyone in this room will have an opinion about what number 1 looks like. And then the second thing we're doing, oddly enough, as though we planned this, the second thing that we're doing is kicking off the 50th anniversary of this college. So you would think we planned, just a couple of years before the 50th anniversary to become number 1 in the nation. So our college opened its doors in 1966, and it had a revolutionary president. His name was Joe Fordyce. And there were some people that joined him in that process that I call revolutionaries. And it was just amazing what has occurred since that time. He was president from 65 to 71, and he and a guy named Terry O'Banion, and then a group that came together, formed this thing that we call today Santa Fe College. It started at Santa Fe Junior College, and I never really liked that term, junior, because it seemed less than. And so it changed over the years very quickly. We became Santa Fe Community College, and then we didn't have an option when we started offering baccalaureate degrees. We didn't have an option. We had to call the college either Santa Fe State College, which it's not, and if there were one, it would be here, because we got students from every bloody county in the area. But Santa Fe College became the name that we celebrate today. Guess who's sitting beside me this morning? 2 employees that were literally here, walked through the doors of this college the first day it opened. Would you welcome Dr. JoanGolliday and Dr. Doug Johnson?
I have a daughter out there as well. Thank you.
So I have a few questions for them that might enlighten us of how we really got to this national status. And Dr. Golliday, I'll start with you.
All right.
The very first day, what was it like? Dr. Golliday is a mathematics professor, so the very first day of class, what was it like?
Well, let's see. The first time I walked into the building, it was a little bit of nostalgia because it reminded me of the high school I went to before it burned down, and I had nothing to do with that. And the second thought that kind of flitted through was, I hope that the construction they've done has made it safe, since it was no longer deemed a safe building for the public schools. And so having had those, and the next thought was, what kind of students am I going to encounter in this class? Because we have an open door institution, a concept which was new to me, and we had a non-punitive grading system. For those of you who don't know what that means, where there was no failing grade. And we didn't know what we were going to have. We were expecting 500 students, and we opened with closer to 900. So during that first 2 weeks during which I had been hired, we had planning sessions, but the first day it was kind of a trepidation. What am I going to do with a class where I have no way of testing, and we have diverse backgrounds, and everybody is required to take this course that I'm going to be teaching called MS 100. And so it was just kind of, it's a new experience, and we didn't know what we were getting into. And sometimes that's a good idea, because you, not knowing what you're getting into, never having had a school, nothing to follow on, you just went with the flow, so to speak, and you did what worked, and when something didn't work, you changed it.
Dr. Johnson, what surprised you most? when you walked into an open-door college, first day, and Dr. Johnson was a counselor here. So what surprised you the most the first day?
Well, Joan pretty well summarized it. Thank you.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. I think the surprise was that such an experiment could actually be happening.
Yeah.
Because it was an experiment.
It was a huge experiment.
And we were a bunch of relative revolutionaries that had somehow managed to congeal to try this experiment.
Exactly.
In the face of being told that there's no reason to have a community college or a junior college in the university town, they'll never survive.
Right.
Well, we've survived by almost 50% more than anticipated.
Right.
Everybody was busy, everybody was running around as if they knew what they were doing. And
so what was the salary?
my recollection was the salary was in the neighborhood of $5,000 to $5,500, and I was
5,000 for me.
I was a 12-month employee, so I got a little bonus.
So I've heard some of these stories, and a piece of who we are is our culture. What was the strangest, and there are many stories, over a few drinks we've had before, I've seen some of my friends.
Yes.
What was the story that stands out in your mind that was the most bizarre as this college began to form?
Well, probably for me, it was the way I got hired. I was finishing my master's degree in May of '66, and earlier I had read that there was going to be a junior college opening here, and so in March I had gone down to what is now the Hippodrome, which was the old post office, and that was the location for the junior college at that time, and I wanted to put in an application. And they said, no, we're only hiring people who have master's degrees and a minimum of 2 years of teaching experience. And the only teaching experience I had was as a graduate student, so they didn't count that, so I went away. I graduated, came back to school in August, at least I thought I was coming back to school in August. Went in to register, and the chairman of the math department said, well, I'll tell you what classes to take, but I've given your teaching assistantship to somebody else. There's no job, there's no money. So I went home in a bit of a panic because everything I owned was here, and I had no income, no job. So my mother had driven back with me from Maryland, and she said, well, why don't you try the junior college? Maybe they need substitutes or part-time people. And so I drove down to the post office, and I went in, and the secretary says to me, she says, can I help you? And I said, yes, I'd like to put in a job application for teaching part-time. And she said, well, what's your field? And I said, well, I have a master's degree in mathematics. At that point, she leaned back in her chair, and she yelled, Dean Sheepak, we got one!
It's a little different now.
So I went in and I had my job interview, no application, no transcripts, no letters of reference. And he said, would you take part-time work? And at that point I would have taken anything. And I said, sure. So he says, I'll call you tomorrow. So the next morning he called and said, would you like a full-time job? And the following Monday, I started my 2-week training for the opening of the college. So that's how I started out in what was to be my first job, which turned out to be my only job. I retired from here after 33 years.
Wow.
I'm always left till second because Joan always has my
I'll start
story.
with you for next time.
No, that's fine. I'm happy with it. That apparently was the standard for hiring, because I had heard that Santa Fe was looking for people, but I was finishing up a second year of graduate school and was beginning to look for what I was going to do the next year. I'd come to the University of Florida to work for Bill Ryan in the Florida Union because I wanted to be a big-time union director somewhere. Well, so several people said, well, they're looking for somebody that's got some student activities experience, which I had. Yeah. So I went over and went in the building and went, golly, boy, this sure is an old school building. All right, I guess they've rehabbed it. So I found Terry O'Banion's office, and Vicki Delano was the secretary there, and for those of you that might remember. And she said, oh, yeah, he's expecting you, because I had made a phone call ahead of time. So I went into his office, sat down in a chair. He's back behind his desk, and we chatted for about 20 minutes, and he said, well, I guess under the circumstances, you better go back out there and have Vicki give you an application, because we think we can use you. And that's how that worked. It was an interesting arrangement where everything was new. Everybody was new, everything was new, the idea...
Except the building?
Yeah. Well, it was newly propped up, apparently. And it was, after talking with Terry, it seemed to me that this just was going to be one of the most wonderful experiments that I had ever heard of. And it was a great honor to be able to be a part of that in the beginning. It was just absolutely incredible.
So, Doug, it's rather phenomenal what's occurred. And you've been here and watched the whole time. What one thing do you think in the development of this college contributed more than anything else to an obsession of serving students and then serving them with a quality orientation that still exists today? What was one thing in the development, beginning early on until today, that you think contributes to that?
It was a team. Everybody worked together toward the same general goal of making it the best teaching institution that we possibly could. That was it. And that was part of that imagination and the way to do it without punishing students for what they couldn't do and rewarding them for what they could do.
Wow.
And that was reflected in the grading system, of course, but it was also reflected everywhere.
What do you think?
And I think the other thing was during those first few years, we were small. I think, there were probably no more than 50 full-time faculty at the beginning, and so we knew each other, and of course we were housed in temporary facilities. I mean, classrooms had been converted to 8 offices, and the back area of the stage was converted to offices, and there was no attempt to put people with their own discipline. So very early, the idea of the interdisciplinary housing and the idea of sharing what you know about your students with other people in other disciplines. So it was, like you said, very much a team, even whether that was the intent with the housing or not, that's what happened. We talked about what was going on within our discipline, but we also talked about what was happening with our students in other areas. So I think that was very much a factor in laying the foundation. And during those first few years, as new faculty came in, they actually went through one semester of enculturation. That's the only term I can put for it, where every Wednesday afternoon for 2 hours they met and talked about the philosophy of the college and how we worked with our students and what we were trying to do with the institution.
And as new faculty began, and Terry O'Banion pretty much led this, he's coming back. He was here a couple of years ago, and he's coming back. But I told new faculty the other day, 2 weeks, 2 full weeks, 8 hours a day of training. And so you started with a base. But what trait among the employees, as this group formed, what one trait stood out among the new employees?
You want to go first?
Sure. Deference. I think that I believe that everyone believed that this dream could happen.
Could happen. Yeah.
And that, I think that was universal. Yeah. Everybody was allowed to go about it their own way, and that was encouraged to try things that you thought would work, and then that was oftentimes shared. And so standardization was not required, and in fact, individual efforts to make things work in your classroom for those particular students that happened to be there in that class at that time is what was encouraged.
What was okay.
Yeah, it was for individuals. It wasn't standing up, this is the lecture for such and such, and if you don't get it, too bad. It's today we're going to talk about such and such, and if you don't get it, let me know.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
You know, the same kind of thing. We did find some, obviously, an area like mathematics, you have a little bit more problem of trying to take every student where they are and take them as far as you can. And we found very quickly with the MS 100 that students had different backgrounds. And so very quickly, ours evolved into kind of a history of mathematics more than a subject matter. And so we kind of left that for later. But we also, knowing that students needed help, one of the very early things we did within the first year, again, I wasn't the person who made this decision, but, you know, we talked about it, those of us that were full-time math, and we said, you know, these students need help. And so we hired a work-study student who happened to be a young man proficient in English, but he was from Kathmandu, and he opened our first math lab, helping students, you know, so that they had a place to go. If they weren't comfortable coming to see us, and we knew that some of the students wouldn't come see us for whatever reason, they had another place to go, and that was the math lab, which in its very infant form opened within the first year.
Mm-hmm. So what gives you the greatest joy today, knowing what you started and literally being a part of this family that's empirically the #1 college of 1,200 in the country? What gives you the greatest joy knowing that?
Seeing students that I had in the early years who have come back and been instructors here, seeing the children, and I hate to say it, but now the grandchildren of some of the people that I worked with who are coming here and choosing where they could go to out of state. Some of them are coming in from out of state, but this is the school they're choosing to come back to. Right. And running into students, as I did about a month or so ago, as I was leaving a restaurant, and students saying, "Oh, Dr. Golliday, I wanted you to know you changed my life with the math course that I took with you. I ended up in engineering." Those are the kinds of stories that make you feel good.
The experiment has worked.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And these are the people that are now carrying it on. And I would say to you, thank you.
So just say it. So in the room today, joining these giants are giants that started this college. If you are a retiree employee of this college, would you please stand and let us welcome you home today? If you're a retired employee of this college. Wow. So, you know where I'm going with this. This is what #1 looks like. Congratulations, and thank you for being here today.